if I could get your attention, please.
You got it.
We'll call to order the admin committee meeting for October 13th, 2017. Any board member concerns at this meeting? Dr. Parker will be here in a moment. We only have you and me, right, Ben?
Yep, that's it for right now.
Okay, well, then why don't we go through the items that don't require a board approval, just and then we'll come back to those items which require a majority of the board to be here. How about? Oh, that's right. Who's acting in Wayne's behalf? Is that you, Jill?
It is. Good morning.
Okay. Okay, I gotta tell you, Wayne better be careful leaving the country, because with you in charge, we may have something going on here. Okay.
I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing, but.
I'll put them on.
Do we have a report of travel that we should?
There is a travel report, Dr. Burke, but it doesn't require a motion.
Okay. And let me say this. Who does the travel agency come under? What contract, Mr. Mike?
Dr. Burke, we actually don't use a travel agency for the most part anymore. Most of the travel is domestic, and people book online using Travelocity, Expedia, wherever they can get the cheapest price. I think related to this international travel, we use the Travel Store, which was the agency the districts used for the last decade or two, but we're not married to them in any way, if I'm guessing what it is you're about to tell me. So that's my short answer.
The trip was unbelievable. The trip was very, very productive. The travel was less than you'd expect, especially in the days of computerized booking. So it may be the inexperience of our guys from international travel like that, but it's something that maybe Dr. Parker will sit out and talk about, because it was that portion of the trip was a little tough, the travel part. But I thought we used the travel agency for all of our stuff, and if we did, it was just that it would. I can't imagine.
Yeah, Dr. Burke, that was one-off.
Okay. Okay. Do we have any board member? How about a status report of major ongoing and upcoming projects?
Thank you, Dr. Burke, and additional committee member. This is the item we bring every month, just to make sure that the committee understands that the critical IM projects that have been assigned are ongoing. So I'll just touch on a couple of them. The website improvements. So the new website, behind the scenes, there's been 2,000 pages migrated. The IM staff is going through and doing cleanup and seeing if there are any issues. We're looking at a late November deployment, so you'll hear a little bit more about that in the next coming month and a half or so. The enterprise GIS system project, those are all moving forward. We committed to completing 9 of the 15 projects that have been identified by the end of the fiscal year. As a side note, later today or tomorrow, when Wayne sends out his weekly report to the board members, you'll see your first quarter performance dashboard for the goals and objectives. And one of the items was this EGIS project. And we're going to say we have 0% progress on that report, because That report
Thank you
requires
for
that the
popping
projects
up.
be completed
Yes.
to be counted. You're probably the most interested in this.
Yeah.
To be
I'm
counted as complete.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, no,
But we keep having a thing pop up and block you guys out. Okay.
and just two more items, Dr. Burke, the permit systems automation. So the online permit application filing for dry cleaners, right now it's available for dry cleaners. We don't have it up on the website, but we've been meeting with the Dry Cleaners Association, the engineering permitting group, and IM, and so they're able to use that now. And then about 2 months behind that is going to be the gas station and automotive spray booth application process. So those are all moving forward. And the IT review started last week. So the board hired some consultants to come in to do a comprehensive look at the IT infrastructure and the setup here at the district. And they've been meeting with all of the internal divisions currently over the last week or so. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. But everything's moving as expected. We've got our new assistant DO of IM, and we expect these to keep being positive reports going forward.
Great.
Great. Okay, then moving on to item 6.
Dr.
Do we
Burke,
have any board member?
did you mean to skip
Do we
item
have any
4?
board member?
We went past item 4.
Item
We
7.
want to go back.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Mike.
I was wondering if we went past item 4. It's been, we didn't go past item 4, the board agenda.
I can quickly highlight the public hearings and the set hearings if you'd like.
Okay.
So at the November hearing, we're going to have 2 public hearings for the board to consider our proposed Rule 415, which would reduce odors from rendering operations, and also amendments to Rule 1420, which are emission standards for lead. That's kind of the last piece of all of our lead rules to bring that down to the new federal standard. And then we're setting hearing on 3 rules. One is proposed Rule 1180, which is the fence line and community monitoring for refineries and the neighboring communities. We're adding, proposing to add chemicals to Rule 1466, the rule that deals with soils that are contaminated with toxic air contaminants. And then, I'm sorry, so those are the 2 rules that we're setting, and that would be for the December public hearings. That's it.
Okay.
Excuse me, Dr. Burke?
Yes.
One correction to the report of the items that will be coming to November. Rule 1420 amendments to the lead rule will actually be coming to the board for hearing in December. We've already set hearing on them, but there was a problem with the noticing, so the actual hearing has to be continued to the December board meeting. That's Rule 1420, the lead rule.
Thank you very much. And on the meeting procedures, we want to delay that 1 more month as well. Kurt wants to just circle back with Councilmember Mitchell 1 more time to make sure she's okay with the changes.
One other thing that I want to add to the November calendar is the election of board members.
Okay, we will do that.
Board officers. Okay, and Clark has just pulled up to the hotel, so he'll be in here in just 1 moment. So, is there anything else we can, how about the written reports from Mr. Alatorre?
Actually, you can do number 7, Dr. Burke.
But can we take that without a full board committee?
Yeah, it's just just a report, Dr. Burke.
Okay, let's go.
Thanks, Dr. Burke.
Clark just walked in.
This item just lets the committee know the RFPs and RFQs that we're planning on releasing in the next month. One of them is to replace the fiber cable infrastructure in the building. So that's all of the cabling that was installed when the building was built about 20 years ago. This item will come back before the board when we actually make a selection for a contractor. The next two items are both RFPs, RFQs that come to the board every 2 to 3 years, or come to the committee every 2 or 3 years. We issue an RFP for software systems development, maintenance, and support services. This is to get us a list of vendors, basically, a pre-approved list of vendors that we can use to perform the various services that we need. This contract will come back to the admin committee once we recommend a selection. On the back side, there's an RFQ, so we can identify vendors and pre-qualify them. These will be vendors that we purchase: desktop computers, laptop computers, printers, things of that nature. Again, this will come back to the committee as well once we recommend selection. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions by any of my colleagues?
None here.
Not here.
Does this require a vote?
It does not, Dr. Burke.
Okay. Then we'll receive that and file it and move to the next item, which would be 8.
Item 8, yes. So we have in your packet the proposed schedule for the governing board meetings for 2018. And then we had also included the administrative committee meetings in that. So we're just looking for any potential changes that you would like to make, or whether that's acceptable.
Are there any changes in this agenda schedule that address the concerns of Board Member Nelson expressed at our last discussion of this?
I believe his concern was when meetings got changed once they were scheduled,
Yes. Right. Right.
or they changed
Right.
to the second week because of other options. So these are all the first Fridays of the month
Oh, these are?
for the board
Great.
meetings, yes.
Okay. Then I'll take a motion on this item.
Move the item.
Second?
Would the clerk call the roll?
Vice Chair Benoit,
Aye.
Dr. Parker,
Aye.
Dr. Burke,
Yes.
motion passes
That
3.
Okay. Then item number 8, back to Mr. O'Kelly again.
Thanks again, Dr. Burke, committee members. This item transmits the audit reports for the AB 2766 fee revenue that the district receives from the DMV. So just as background, there's $4 for every vehicle registration in the district that comes to SCAQMD, and it's required to be split. 30% comes to SCAQMD, 30% goes to the MSRC, and 40% goes to local governments. So cities, counties, COGS. That's a 40% that seems like there's regularly questions about what cities and counties are spending the money on, whether they're spending it on hybrid vehicles or parties for ride share and things of that nature. That's this program. The law requires that this be audited every 2 years, and so we hire an independent CPA firm to come in and audit it. What you generally see is SCAQMD and MSRC, we're audited on a regular basis. We don't generally have audit findings, and that's what you see in this report, is there aren't any audit findings for the 30%, which is about $30 million over 2 years for AQMD and $30 million for MSRC. We generally see some findings on over 2 years on the $40 million that goes to the cities and local governments. Some of it's of a non-financial nature, some of it's of a financial nature. I usually talk about the financial part, seems more interesting. To put in some perspective, the last audit that was done, we had about 61 findings that were about $700,000 worth of monies that we said the cities or local governments had to either pay back or have deducted from their future AB 2766 revenues. This time that number is down to about 41 findings, about $250,000. We work with those cities and with the auditors to resolve any issues that come up, and so all of the cities have agreed to either reimburse the money or to have the monies deducted from their future revenues. So this audit's performed in accordance with the guidelines that is prepared by AQMD, was approved by the board several years ago, and generally accepted by the agencies that receive the money. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on the specific of this audit.
This is the same matter that we addressed last meeting, is that correct? So we were talking about which one of the entities have spent all of their appropriate funds?
What's that?
That was a program audit.
Oh, yeah. Yes, Dr. Parker. I think that was from the program side of it. This is sort of very specific to the financial side of it. But same program, yes.
Do we ever find any of the local governments in egregious violation?
I would agree just being where, let's say they just have no records at all, where they say we've spent 40,000 and it's not much more than just their word saying they've spent 40,000. I think the answer would be yes. And, you know, when we find that, you know, the nice thing about this program is the money comes to us first. So, you know, if somebody disagreed and we came to the governing board and said they disagree, and the governing board agreed with staff's analysis, we just withhold the money from them. So it's not like the money goes to them first and we have to go get it back. We just withhold future revenue. So we have kind of power in the purse string on that one. But short answer is yes. Normally what we see with the cities and the local governments, particularly when the recession was going on, is they had tremendous staff turnover. And the employees and the staff they had, you know, would just kind of carry on with as best as they could figure things out. This audit, I think the reason we have less findings and less dollar amounts is things have stabilized in the local government area. We do significant outreach and training. We offer about 15 trainings a year that are pretty well attended, but I think we're seeing less staff turnover. And on top of it, the cities that you see in the news that come up with financial issues, you know, even though they're randomly selected for audit, we also will let the auditors know we think they should look at certain cities that have problems. And so, you know, again, when we find those issues, you know, we withhold funds generally. So I'm sorry, that was a long answer to it, yes.
So you're saying that you've never found a case where there was a problem that took legal recourse?
Not in the time I've been here, and I don't believe historically since the program's been going. Again, Dr. Burke, the process, if they were to disagree with us or say we're wrong, the process is that they come to a hearing before your governing board. So you would hear that, you'd hear their arguments, and then you'd be able to take action from there. And again, with the power of the purse strings, you just cut the spigot off on the cash and get the money back that way. And you could take whatever other legal actions will be appropriate.
And Dr. Burke,
I'm trying to figure out how that correlates with the accusations made by Supervisor Nelson that some people would use this like for their Christmas party.
Yeah, on something like that, Dr. Burke, where we see where they've charged even more egregious than that, where they have no evidence of what they spent it on. Like at least there would be evidence they spent it on a party, as bad as it is. I mean, we'll see sometimes where there's no evidence what they spent it on at all. It's just sort of, you know, was used for general costs. We end up getting the money back. I think what you're saying, maybe if you know there's some malicious intent, I don't know from our staff perspective, from the audit perspective, we believe that we've seen that. But generally I think there was an issue, I'll use an example. There was an issue, I think, with City of Orange with some upgrades to, I think it was a Metrolink station that Supervisor Nelson brought up maybe 6 or 8 months ago. And, you know, we talked with the city, let them know that it was inappropriate and let them know why, and they didn't end up even charging the money for that purpose. But when we see it, it's noted. If we see that they spent it on something inappropriate, and we withhold the funds. I mean, every one of these agencies has voluntarily withheld or paid back the funds for the history of the program.
Mr. O'Kelly, what do we do with the money when we get it back?
It gets reallocated to all the other participants.
And without them making any pro rata share of the reallocation, is that correct?
That's correct, Dr. Parker.
Okay, does item 9 need a motion, Mr. Weiss?
It does, yes.
Move approval.
Second,
Would the clerk call the roll?
Vice Chair Benoit,
Aye.
Dr. Parker,
Aye.
Dr. Burke.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Item number 10.
Thank you again, Dr. Burke, committee members. This item is a requirement that we transmit to the admin committee and the board from a fiduciary standpoint for the 457 deferred comp plan for the district employees. So this is similar to a 401k plan that you might be familiar with in the private sector. It's primarily employee contributions. We have a plan set up. There's about $160 million in the plan. We use Mass Mutual as a record keeper. We've got a consultant that helps with investment selection. From a performance standpoint, the plan's done very well. This year it earned 11.28%. And that's pretty good considering that half of the money in the plan is in a 4% fixed account. A low risk account is where half the money sits. So when you earn 11% and half your money was in 4%, you did pretty well. We actually beat our retirement plan on a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year basis, pretty soundly on a 10-year basis. I was thinking like 3 in the morning, I woke up and was thinking maybe we do analysis and send a recommendation to them that they just follow what we're doing here. I'm being facetious, but we really did beat them significantly on a 10-year basis, and 3-year and 5-year. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Still, Kelly, are you saying that the 11% is a net of all fees?
That's gross. Our expense ratio is 0.68%, so net we would be right at around 10.5. Our pension plan, I think, earned 13 this year. They would have a much higher expense ratio and higher volatility built in as well. But so net of gross of fees or net of fees, it would be about 10.5. And our fee structure, I like to brag about this plan because I think we're doing pretty good on it. Our fee structure, normally you might see more of like an 0.85, 0.83 expense ratio, and we have it down to 0.68. So our expense ratio is lower than other like plans.
Take a motion on this item.
Move approval.
Move the item.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Would the clerk call the roll?
Vice Chair Benoit,
Aye.
Dr. Parker,
Aye.
Dr. Burke.
Aye.
Motion passes
The
3-0.
next item.
Thanks again, Dr. Burke, committee members. This is the last item I have here. There was a question that I believe Dr. Liu brought up about an RFP that Derek put out for legislative advocacy services, where we standard, the procurement policy that's been adopted by the board by standards offers preference points for local firms when they're going to be doing 90% of the work within South Coast AQMD. And I think Dr. Liu brought up the fact that you would normally not expect your legislative advocates to be doing 90% of their work within the basin. They're probably going to be in Sacramento or DC. I didn't make the comment at the time, but that's the standard that the board's approved. Obviously, when Derek would receive those proposals, if they would have certified they're going to do 90% of the work in the basin, we looked, and in the past they never certify that. But if they did, Derek would have questioned that, and that would have factored probably into his decision-making process on his recommendation. But to satisfy, if this comes up again, we thought it still made sense to make a revision of the procurement policy, basically to specify that proposals for legislative representation that would be in Sacramento or DC, that they're not eligible for those incentive points, and we won't even confuse the issue by having it in the RFP form. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. What good does it do us to talk about who's located in office here versus an office? Are we talking about offices, or are we just talking about people?
It's the actual work, Dr. Parker. So you'll see in most government agencies, and I think it probably stems from cities and then counties, and then it goes forward where where you can incentivize businesses that are doing business within your locale with your constituents and helping the economy in your area, that there's incentivization. So it's 90% of the actual work has to be performed in the basin. So if somebody hasn't has an office in, let's say, Las Vegas, but they're a consultant and they're going to do all their work here on site at the district, they could potentially certify. And the argument there would be, well, what's the economic incentive? Well, they're staying in a hotel, they're buying meals, they're being entertained, and they're spending money in the district. I think that's kind of the basis for why you offer the points in the first place. But it has to be 90%. And I know when we're reviewing proposals that I'm involved in, you're looking to see, does it make sense what people are certifying when they're submitting proposals. If they say they're going to do the work in the district and it's going to mostly be work that you do electronically and they don't even have an office in the district, you would question that, and that would factor into the recommendation that came back to the committee.
Well, the only reason I asked that question is because would it make better sense to say, with the exception of where we're actually looking for representation, we're looking for lawyers who have expertise in certain areas in a certain region. We'd be better off make sure we have somebody who knows what they're doing in that area. Likewise, we're looking for this kind of representation. I don't think it does us any good to lessen the standards of what it is that we need to have in order to meet that economic situation when we're asking for people to represent us in Washington or in Sacramento. But that's my feeling. I just don't know if we should not also allow for an exception for some of the things that we need, experienced expertise in.
So, Dr. Parker, I think that concern, has been addressed in the policy. So this is where we issue points. We limit the amount of extra points that any proposal can get, regardless. But when we're reviewing proposals, the policy allows for the district to do what makes the most sense for the district. You don't have to go with the highest bidder with the points or with the lowest score. So I can assure you, at least, and I think probably Kurt and Derek would say the same thing. When there are proposals, even if somebody gets more points because of some of these things, if there's some expertise that we need, the recommendation we bring to the committee, we don't always recommend the firm that had the highest points. So we make those considerations when we're bringing the recommendations to these committees. And I think that was a concern when the policy was written. So I think we're addressing the concern you have.
Okay, thank you.
With that being said, is there a motion for this item?
I'll move the item.
Second,
Would the clerk call the roll?
Vice Chair Benoit,
Aye.
Dr. Parker,
aye.
Dr. Burke,
Yes.
motion passes 3-0.
Mr. Lowe?
Good morning, Dr. Burke, members of the committee. This item is to transfer funds to realign expenditures for the Enhanced Particulate Monitoring Program. This proposed action is to transfer up to $180,000 into the Science Technology Advancement budget from salaries major object to the temporary services category. And this is that have been used to fill in vacancies temporarily to account for retirements, promotions, etc. I'll be happy to take any questions on that item.
Any questions for Mr. Lowe?
On here?
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second,
Motion.
Would the clerk call the roll?
Vice Chair Benoit,
Aye.
Dr. Parker,
aye.
Dr. Burke,
Aye.
motion passes 3-0.
Dr. Fine?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. We actually prepared a brief presentation just because we're all excited about the technology and it makes for a good presentation. So I could either give a brief verbal or go through a brief presentation. I'll at your discretion.
What's the pleasure of the committee?
Verbal is fine with me.
Verbal, he said verbal.
Verbal? Just verbal? Okay. So we won't do the presentation then. So this item, a few months ago, we came to the board to get funds approved to carry out our MATES 5 study, which will start in 2018. And at the time, we mentioned that we would be coming back to the board to do a complement to the MATES study with the more advanced monitoring technologies, both the low-cost sensors that we've been talking about, but also some of the higher-cost advanced remote sensing equipment. So this item is that coming back to the board. Staff has identified several technologies and projects that will really keep the district at the forefront of monitoring technology. They include some low-cost sensor deployments, some aircraft measurements, purchases of technology that we've been piloting over the last several years for looking at VOC emissions from refineries in oil and gas. So this is just a package to supplement our MATES study, to try to do it concurrently with MATES so we have that comparison data, and to keep the district at the forefront of this advanced technology. Happy to answer any questions.
How many monitors are we going to be having, say, at a typical refinery?
So,
You know?
so part of MATES is a focus on refinery monitoring. With the passage of AB 1647 by Assemblymember Maritsuchi, there will be community and fence line monitoring required at every refinery in the basin within the next 2.5 years. So there will be some monitoring next to refineries from MATES, and this action will enable that at probably 2 or 3 refineries, but it will also set us up for the future where we're going to have permanent monitoring at all the refineries per what is now state law.
This will be real time, is that correct?
Much of this equipment is real time. The low-cost sensors are real time. The mobile monitoring will be getting data back in real time. The aircraft measurements are new for us. That data will have to be analyzed, but it can cover a very wide area in a short period of time and point out where we might be missing important emission sources.
Are we getting additional money from AB 47? Maritsuchi's bill?
That bill's not providing any funding, but we hope to get our share of the money from the AB 617 funding, 27 million statewide to implement that program, and it will be monitoring next to our major sources in that program, including refineries. But part of 1647 is that the community monitoring conducted by the district next to refineries will be paid for by the refineries themselves.
Oh, so the refineries will have to pay for those monitors?
Yeah, but it will be some kind of cost reimbursement or fee that the district will impose to pay for those costs.
You don't sound very authoritative on that. Is that what you hope to do, may do, thinking about doing, could happen?
Dr. Burke, there's legislation that specifically obligates the refineries to reimburse us for the community monitoring. So it's
Well,
definitive.
then why didn't he sound so
Must be the.
unsure of himself?
Sounded good on this side.
I think it's just the mechanism that we need to work out. It's not that we're doubting that we will get reimbursed. It's just whether it's through a fee or a billing or reimbursement. We're working on that now.
Well, is it specified the specific number of monitors every so many feet apart or whatever it may be that we have to adhere to, that they would, so when you start asking for reimbursement, they can't say that we have more than what the law requires or
Right,
whatever?
that's exactly where I was going.
So the legislation does not specify, but it does direct the districts to come up with some guidelines in order to just to kind of lay out the objectives and what might be needed in terms of monitoring. So again, we're actively working on that. We just don't have all the answers at this time.
Well, when we do those guidelines, who approves them?
The board.
Yeah, we would do a public process and bring it before the board.
Well, then the refineries have no ability to challenge our plan?
Yeah, they could, Dr. Burke. I mean, they could take the position that we've unreasonably interpreted the legislation. The legislation also has a reference to EPA monitoring procedures. So there are definitely some guidelines there that we'll have to follow.
But the people that we're buying the monitors from, do they have guidelines as to exactly how far apart these monitors would be in order to give us the kind of reliability that we're looking for?
Generally not. A lot of the siting guidelines have been put out by US EPA. However, those guidelines tend to be, based on the traditional type of monitoring. So when we're talking about sensors or talking about remote sensing, there's a lot less that's been established. It is cutting edge, so our guidelines will, be some of the first that are developed in order to figure out how to do this.
Will we have this done?
Well, we're working on our Rule 1180, which is scheduled for December to implement 1647 in whole or in part. At this point, we're mostly dealing with the fence line portion of the state requirements, and then we'll move into the community component of the state requirements, which will be handled by the district. 1647 also has a requirement for refineries to conduct their own fence line monitoring. And that needs to be done according to guidelines developed by the districts.
We have a lot of guidelines to make, not only for ourselves, but for the refineries as well. But you haven't stated when you're going to have it done. What was my question?
So so as part of Rule 1180, we will have the fence line guidelines complete by the time 1180 comes before the board. We already have drafts. We've already been doing that in the public process. The community monitoring, because it's changed a little bit because of the signing of this legislation by the governor, we may come back to that a little bit later. But time is short because the legislation requires us to have the monitoring up and running by the beginning of 2020. So 2 years to get all that done and purchase all the equipment and deploy at multiple sites is a challenge. So we're working as fast as we can. So December for the fence line guidance, and we would think close to first quarter of next year for the community guidance.
So what I'm hearing is no Christmas.
We never have Christmas.
Short break.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm not quite clear on. This is asking for an authorization and transfer of funds, but you don't have a plan.
These projects are using advanced technology and testing out the advanced technology that could potentially be implemented on a long-term basis as part of these plans. So this is not about establishing permanent monitoring at refineries. This is the advanced monitoring that will occur for a year or so concurrent with MATES. As we stated back in when we came to the board with the core MATES 5 project, we said we wanted to come back with some more advanced technologies to supplement the MATES study and to focus on refinery emissions and other sources in disadvantaged communities.
Does that mean you have a plan?
Yes, we have a plan going forward. There's a lot of new monitoring requirements in state law from 1647 to 617. And what this request does is set us up to do that with the most cutting edge technology to really maximize our ability to make this a successful program.
Okay, well, I'll see what my colleagues' approach is. I'm open.
Well, I think what you're saying is that it came down so fast that you don't really know what you're going to do.
It's very recent. It's
next
very
week.
recent developments, yes. But again,
the whole matter itself is, and the reason why, as you already know, Dr. Fine, I'm concerned, is because we're talking about having refinery committee meetings. And all of these new things themselves are going to be asked. And as the chairperson of that committee, I'm very concerned we're going to be asked questions that we don't want to sound like we don't know what we're doing and when we're going to do it. That is going to affect some future things that we're going to be basically discussing. So I think it's something that we should set some proposed dates of a definitive nature to let people know that we have thought about it and we're looking at it very definitively. And I know you're doing that, so I don't mean to imply that you haven't. But I recognize that you've got a lot on your plate, but, we're here to help you to share some of the load. And if we can come up with some kind of tentative scheduled dates, I think that would be better than going in and saying, we don't know which way we're going to go. Because it leaves everything open to debate, and we're having discussions around matters that really may not be, make it sound too directive driven. So anyway, that's what I would say, but I share your frustration and I share your concern, is that, you got a lot of other things that you've already planned right now, and how do you shove this in order to do it? And it's going to need your leadership at the top in order to basically direct this.
Another challenge, Dr. Parker, is for the 617 monitoring, the California Air Resources Board is directed to set up the state guidelines, not us, and we have to follow those guidelines. And the timing for that, while we're pushing to have it done as quickly as possible, is not under our control.
So this is Jill. I think that's a really good suggestion, and before we go to the refinery committee, and probably to some extent when we bring proposed rule 1180 to the governing board, we can outline sort of how all these pieces fit together and what is the timeline for developing the different guidelines and the technologies. So I think we can really clarify that messaging and help out.
Okay. And that's what I was really getting at. I think that we're asking the question here today, and I'm quite sure you probably weren't prepared to give a definitive answer and be held to that number. But to give us some kind of grant as to how we get to where we need to be, and, within a certain period of time, with certainly modifications being acceptable to what it is, but recognizing that the ultimate date itself, we got 2 years to do it all within. And whether or not we're going to do A, B, C in that order, we may have to jump up and take some things out, out of order in order to get to that. So anyway, I'm quite sure you guys know better than what you're going to do and how you're going to do it than I do. But I think that as being part of a committee, we need to have some kind of feel that we feel that when we're making representations to the community, to the legislators, that we have some kind of idea as to exactly where we're going with this.
Agreed.
And what I don't want us to get caught up in is a political machination by the author of the bill to be playing to the public and giving them the perception that we can do things that perhaps we may not be able to do in a time frame we can't do them. Because it's easy to write a bill, it's hard to go out and do the work.
That's true. And I also just wanted to add that for AB 617, we're having weekly calls with high-level folks at ARB. So we're trying to work very closely with them and make that program fit into what our district priorities are, like our expanded air toxics plan. So we're trying to sort of drive that conversation so that it's not completely extra work. It just might help accelerate and enhance the work that we were already planning to do. So, but they have to go through the public process.
Has ARB addressed this issue at all, other than just saying we got 2 years to do it? On a modular type of basis, we're going to try to have this done by this date and have that done within that date, within the time period, 60 days, 90 days, whatever?
So within the 1647 legislation, that is all mandates on the districts and refineries, and there's no involvement by California Air Resources Board. In terms of the AB 617 legislation, that California
Yes, sir.
the Air Resources Board has, the Air Resources Board has the role to set up the state guidance, and that the selection of communities and the emission reduction plans all need to go through the state. And the deadlines in AB 617 for the first round of community monitoring even tighter than the than AB 1647 deadlines. So it is a challenge, but we're trying to integrate all these programs together to gain the most efficiencies.
Hey, when will you be back to us and let us know what the outline is? What are you anticipating?
Well, I know we're trying to set up a refinery committee meeting. We can agendize a separate item on monitoring in addition to, the main item, which will be the proposed Rule 1410. Or whatever comes first. If we come to December for Rule 1180, we can also provide an update on all aspects of this type of monitoring.
Well, I would anticipate we're going to have a certain number of legislative representatives there, not the legislators themselves, at a refinery meeting, and they're going to be asking these very definitive questions. So I think we should be prepared to give some kind of answer rather than kicking the ball down the field.
Okay.
Okay.
Take a motion on 13.
Move approval.
Second.
Would the clerk call the roll?
Vice Chair Benoit,
Aye.
Dr. Parker,
Aye.
Dr. Burke.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
Item 14. Kurt, I think you can waive the presentation on this. We beat this around long
Yeah.
enough.
We have.
Give us the highlights.
We have, Dr. Burke. If you remember, last month you directed that I work with Board Member Mitchell to address committee concerns regarding the board procedures. I did that in light of Ms. Mitchell's inability to attend the meeting today. I was wondering if you didn't want to put this over until next month.
I will do that. We'll put this over until the November meeting. Item 15, Mr. Alatorre.
Morning, Dr. Burke and committee members. First of all, welcome back, both Dr. Parker and Dr. Burke. I'm sure it was a long flight, but glad you're here. Purpose of this item is to amend an existing contract with Google for amount up to $276,275.44. This will extend an ongoing YouTube video campaign promoting our Right to Breathe video. Funding for this effort will come from a credit from Google to South Coast in the amount of $276,275.44. No new funds will be allocated for this campaign. Our current campaign with Google promoting the Right to Breathe will end on November 1st. This board item will authorize the campaign starting in November through March of 2018. Like our current campaign, the new initiative will also promote the Right to Breathe. However, it will be the updated Right to Breathe video, now in post-production, slated for completion in November. I recommend approval for this item and would be happy to answer any questions.
I'll move the item.
Second.
Clerk call the roll.
Vice Chair Benoit,
Aye.
Dr. Parker,
Aye.
Dr. Burke.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Mr. Alatorre, your second item.
Yes, sir. Next item is to appoint 2 new members to the Environmental Justice Advisory Group. Those members are Mr. Donald Smith. He's the president of the 136th Street Block Club and also a Compton resident. And also Mr. David McNeil, who's executive officer of the Baldwin Hills Conservancy, which is a state agency. Recommend we appoint these.
Who recommended these people?
So
Who recommended these people?
Sure, I believe Donald Smith was at our Compton meeting that we had down there, and he said he wanted to get involved, and then you had mentioned possibly appointing him to the Environmental Justice Advisory Group. So that's where that came from. And I believe Mr. McNeil, my understanding, it came from Dr. Burke. It came from you, Dr. Burke. He's with Baldwin Hills Conservancy. You don't recall?
Okay. That's an admirable group, so they'd be a good addition to our council. Okay. Can I get a motion on this item?
No motion.
Second.
There's no motion required.
No motion required.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Requested.
Yes, it
Yes.
said motion required.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking down. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I'm looking at the wrong number.
I'll make the motion.
so
Second,
would the clerk call the roll?
Vice Chair Benoit,
Aye.
Dr. Parker,
aye.
Dr. Burke,
Aye,
motion passes 3-0.
okay. Okay, the next is just written reports by you to receive and file, correct,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Alatorre?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll receive and file. Any other business before the admin committee meeting this morning? Is there any public comment in CCA?
No, sir?
Nope.
Paul, do you have anything you'd like to say? No, Paul said he doesn't want to testify, so there is no testimony here at the Lux. So this adjourns the admin committee
Dr.
meeting.
Burke, excuse me, I just wanted to point out that the next meeting date, because of a holiday, the next meeting for this committee was Thursday, November 9th at 10 a.m. So that's different than the normal schedule. So I just want to point that out, folks.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.